Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Hanovi Schoonover, the Training and Resource Coordinator at Redwind Consulting, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we'll be going over building relationships and connections with children and youth. Joining us today is our presenter, Sandy Davidson, of the Anishinaabe and White Earth Nation, who I will now turn it over to.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. And somebody please let me know if somehow I get lost. But I'm so happy to be on this webinar with all of you today. And I'll be talking about one of the issues that's been very dear to my heart for many, many years, as I have worked as an advocate for the children and youth of women that are being battered. Again, my name is Sandy. I'm Anishinaabe from the White Earth Nation. I've done work throughout the years in shelters, in a small rural shelter surrounded by 3 major reservations, in a large urban center, as as the Children and Youth Program Director at the Minnesota Coalition for Battered Women. And most recently, I have retired from Praxis International, which is a national technical assistance provider for programs funded through the Office on Violence Against Women. In that capacity, for the past 10, 12 years, I worked to develop and implement a national advocacy learning center. So the role of advocacy, like working with children and youth, is very dear to my heart, and I think that advocates are a powerful force for change. So I'm so happy to see so many of you joining this call, and I hope it's helpful. To the extent possible, I would like to have this be interactive. I'll move forward with the presentation, but if at some point you have questions or want to make a comment, I will try to track in the chat session, or maybe one of you helpers in the background can help me respond to comments or questions. At the end, we will leave time, if you have questions or comments or a particular issue that you'd like some help problem solving with. I'm not saying I have the answers, but, maybe we can at least talk about it. So with that, we will move forward with the presentation. And when we talk about connecting with youth and children, I think one of the first things is that we have to authentically connect with a non-offending parent. Anytime you're working with children, regardless of the age, if they're infants on up to, teens, up to 18 years, I think is the legal cutoff or whatever for a minor. But to work with them effectively, it's really important to connect with the non-offending parent. And sometimes that can be challenging when they are in crises and, they just are looking for help in whatever way they can, and their children might be acting out. So many things are happening. So I always challenge advocates, to find a way to really authentically connect with them. I think it's important to define your role as an advocate. The non-offending parent, or I'm just going to use mother because most of the time it's a mother. It may be a same-sex relationship or not, but the non-offending parent is typically a woman, and a woman who's being battered. So when you're building this relationship, it's helpful to let the mother know what your role is, what you can and what you can't do as an advocate. And it's important to try to understand what the personalities are of their children. The fact is that even when a woman is being battered, her children are very, very important to her. And she knows better than anybody what their personalities are, how they're affected by the violence that they're living in. What are the cultural issues? I don't know what tribal affiliation folks have that are on this call, but we know that every tribe has different customs, different practices, and your program may include people from different tribes. So, understand what is their cultural knowledge. Maybe there is none. Maybe they have been assimilated to the extent, because we all know about colonization and the impact of colonization and how so many tribes have lost that connection to traditions, to language, to whatever, and we're all on this continuum of assimilation to some extent. So it's important as you're building those relationships to really understand where people are coming from. If they're deeply involved in their traditions and their culture, that's an avenue to really help build those relationships with both the children, regardless of the age, and the mother. What are the interests of the kids? Again, mothers, even in crises, they know what their kids are interested. If they're interested in sports or creative expressions or dance or music or whatever it is, they know what their children are interested in. And then what are their needs? I think if you're in a shelter setting, and again, I don't know you as an audience, if you're coming from a shelter program, a community-based program, what kind of program that you're operating from, but what are the needs? And I think if you are in a shelter, you're obviously providing food, so you want to find out if there's any allergies or medical needs or whatever. And I think that moms in crises, when they know that you really care and want to meet the needs of their children, it's helping build that authentic relationship with them, right? I also think it's really important to identify what are the additional support of friends and family. We know that in so many Native communities, we have the extended family members that play an integral role in raising the kids and being there for them. And I think it's really important for both the mother and the children to identify not just the advocates that are available to help, but who in their community, their family, is there to support them. This, again, shows, the mother that you are really sincerely and authentically interested in supporting her and her children. Discuss what some of the interactions and activities that will help repair the mother-child relationship and strengthen those bonds. And I'll talk about this off and on throughout this presentation, the importance of strengthening and repairing that mother-child relationship. Those children are going to be in your program, and the mother is going to be in your program for a very short amount of time. But they will leave, and they will spend the rest of their life connected to the non-offending parent or the mother. And those relationships have been typically strained to the max when living with a batterer's violence. So it's so important to find out and talk with the mother about what you can do to really help kind of strengthen that relationship. I always, from experience and on many different levels, I always say that battered women work like dogs, because they always have to have everything just so to please the abuser so he doesn't explode or, cause more harm in the home or whatever. So they don't always have the time they want to spend with their children, and they're so busy surviving that it's really difficult sometimes. So again, when the mothers know that you are really interested in helping them connect on a really positive, strong level with their kids, it helps build that authentic connection. And if in your program for some reason you're doing child care or you're doing an activity with the children, regardless of the age, when you bring the children back to the mother, always report the positives. Again, a woman that's in crises, that's living with the batterer's violence, and with a lot of the behaviors that kids exhibit when they're living with that violence, she's stressed to the max, so she doesn't want to hear it. Well, your child didn't listen today and was acting up and being naughty or whatever it is. And when I worked in shelter and I was training advocates and volunteers and foster grandmothers or whoever was working with the kids, I'd always tell them, you know, you don't have to like all the children. You do have to treat them kind. And even if you really got to dig, find something positive to say back to the mother. And I don't mean to say this, you know, to kind of sound like kids are so bad or whatever, but we all know that when children are living with the batterer's violence, their behaviors so many times are inappropriate. They're naughty. When they feel safe, they start acting out even more. So it's really, really hard. And I just think that it helps build those relationships and helps connect with the mother when you know, find that positive. Like I said, even if you got to dig, like he held my hand when we crossed the street during the activity. It might be something as simple as that. But yeah, you know, focus on the positive. This next slide here, we're talking about providing information regarding your role as an advocate. If you are a mandated reporter, I think it's really important to, first of all, say up front, you know, I am a mandated reporter, and if, you know, if I hear any information that leads me to believe that your child or children are being abused or neglected in any way, I'm obligated to report. You know, just put that information out there. And I think that in and of itself builds trust with a woman that's being battered. Also, you know, explain what your role is, you know, and I don't know what your roles are. I can share some of the roles that I had as an advocate. I might help get kids enrolled in school, or I might help find childcare, or, you know, I might find resources for them, or whatever it is. But to explain your role as an advocate is really important so they understand what to expect from you. I think it's really important, too, to provide information about the dynamics of abuse and the tactics used by a batterer. Because so many times when women are living with that violence, they're just surviving. And, you know, I've talked to so many women, they say, oh, my kids don't know what's going on. And the fact is the kids do know. And you probably all know that, you know, from working with kids, because they will tell you some of the most horrific stories of things that they've heard or that they've witnessed in the home. But, you know, having that information at your fingertips and explaining the impact on children, letting them know that maybe their chronic complaints about tummy aches or headaches or boo-boos or whatever it is, that's all part of the impact of living with the batterer's violence. The anger that they exhibit. A lot of times kids, again, regardless of the age, they don't have a language to describe what it is that's going on with them, but all they can do is act out in anger, frustration, and helplessness. So helping the mother understand that and helping the mother see and define the tactics that batterers use to drive that wedge between the children. I mean, I've got stories that could go on forever about ways the harm doer has driven that wedge between the mother and children from, you know, refusing to let the mother even give her infant child a bottle to, you know, saying that she's no good, she's lazy, she's stupid, she's this, she's that. And especially with older children and with older boys, they start thinking, oh, yeah, she is no good, you know, she is lazy. And so they drive that wedge, and the children are pushed further and further away from a mother who's being battered. And then to give them information about the harm done to that mother-child relationship. Like I said earlier, those kids come into your program, and they're only in your program for, might be overnight, a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is in your program. they're there for a very short time compared to the rest of their life. So giving them information about, what harm is done to that mother-child relationship and what your role as an advocate is in helping, kind of restore that relationship. I don't think sometimes it takes time to restore because some relationships are so broken and the children have gotten those negative messages about their mother for so long they really believe that she is no good and they don't listen. He might undermine her parenting, all kinds of things happening, but helping her kind of understand the harm that's done and, in the process of building that authentic relationship, coming up with ideas or activities or whatever, that's going to help kind of repair that relationship. And there's any number of things, and we can talk about that as time goes on, or maybe some of you folks might have some suggestions or ideas of things that you've done, activities you've done with families to, have the mother and the children do things together. I mean, I've done little art projects, or I've taken them for trips in the woods to pick blueberries, or just done silly things, like one time we pretended we were having a movie night and, we set up a movie and had popcorn and blankets on the floor and the moms and the kids all laid down and watched this movie together and, just to spend that time strengthening that relationship was so healing for both the moms and the kids, I think. So I'll just say I said quite a bit about, ways to repair the mother-child relationship. But, again, I just want to emphasize, I define batters are those who control and they cause harm, right? They drive that wedge between the kids in so many different ways, and they undermine. She might say, okay, kids, you need to sit down and eat your supper now, and he might come along and say, yeah, you don't have to eat that, or, that just kind of dismisses her power and decision-making as a parent. And again, I just want to emphasize that, that's the role of an advocate, and I think that helps both children and mothers the most, is when you help repair the harm that's been done. So now I'm going to talk a little bit, I'll break it down with the different kind of age groups, because we all know that children develop at certain rates and what have you, and there's distinct things that you can do depending on the age of the child. And again, working with infants, this is why it's so important to build that authentic relationship with the mother, because she again understands the wants and needs of her infant, and all the different things that she's done while being battered at the same time. And I think it's really important to ask her permission. What is okay with her? I know when I was working in shelter and working with several different tribes, with different customs or whatever, and with a diverse group of residents in the shelter, because it wasn't all Native. It was mostly Native residents, but there were some non-Natives in there. And she didn't want other people touching her child's hair. So my role as an advocate was to educate other residents, Native and non-Native alike, advocates who weren't familiar with some of those things, what to do and what not to do. And that was based on what I had talked with the mother about and what she was okay with us doing. Some mothers weren't okay with, sometimes some people are really bold and they just come up and grab the baby and say, oh, it's so cute, and start pinching the cheeks or pinching the little legs. And, if the mother's not okay with someone doing that, you can let her know. I can't catch them all the time, but if I see that happening, I will advocate for you and for your child and ask people not to do that, because that's what your wishes are. And I think, touching the hair, holding, carrying, ties in with some of those cultural considerations. And again, look into your own communities, into your own backgrounds, and and see what those cultural considerations are, because I don't know what the tribal customs are for the people that you're working with, but you're all smart enough, you probably figured all that out already, but I had to put it down, right, because it is really important to talk about. Again, advocate on behalf of the infants, with the community, other staff. I've had to do things with staff because I didn't like, to be honest, I didn't like the way staff was sometimes treating the kids. They were, they weren't physically violent or anything, but, I thought that they were, kind of being bossy and telling kids to be quiet and get out of their hair. I mean, that was a message, whether they said it that way or not. And I'd have to advocate for those children. This baby, even if she's a baby, she's a baby, she might be crying incessantly because she's picking up on the crises that mom is in. So, to talk with other staff sometimes, or other residents, or other family members, and say, this baby doesn't have the words to say what's going on, but they feel that. Our babies are so tuned in to our feelings, so they express it in different ways, right? So I think maybe I'll stop right here, and I don't know if we have the capacity to open up the mic, but I wonder if anybody has any thoughts or, questions that are coming up right now. Is it possible to open up the lines or have people chat or type something into the chat room?
Yeah.
Maybe to share some experiences?
Yeah. So if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat box, and the presenters will be able to see this.
Or if you've had some other ideas, because I always think we learn from each other. They ask me to do presentations and stuff, and I know a thing or two, but really, we're all experts in many different ways, and experiences help other people learn. You may have done something in your program with a family that other people could benefit from hearing about.
All right, so we got a question. How do you get the mothers and children into counseling? Do the abusive spouses often prevent that from happening?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, again, we have to go back to what is it the mother wants. And I think women that are being battered need all the support they can get. And I think that they get a lot of support from other women going through similar things. So I'm not always convinced, talking to a counselor who is kind of removed from, the real life situation of a family. I'm not always convinced that's what's needed. I think sometimes because, we think, we just need counseling, or we need help, or we need someone to tell us what to do. That's the go-to place for a lot of women that are being battered. And again, children can go into counseling or therapy, and they can spend, a significant amount of time. But in the long run, I think building that relationship with the mother and child is the best possible thing to do, because they are connected for life, right? But, if you've got to get someone into counseling, or they want to get into counseling, I think the role of an advocate is to find out who the counselors are in your community, and what do they know about, and and what do they understand about the dynamics of living with a batterer's violence? You know, I think what I've seen over the years is so many counselors, therapists, people that want to help, they inadvertently kind of put the responsibility back on the woman that's being battered, and they don't focus on the batterer's behavior and what he's doing, right? I think now I'm getting long-winded on this one, but I have a lot of thoughts that kind of come to my head when I see this question up on the screen here. So much of our interventions focus on the mother and the child, right? But what's in place? What kind of counseling does a batterer need? You know, there's this controversy about, is it about anger control or is it about batterer's intervention, where batterers are re-educated and learn to take responsibility for their behavior. We all know that it isn't just about anger, because they're very manipulative and know very much, you know, why are they battering here in the privacy of the home and putting marks where nobody can see it. That's very, they know exactly what they're doing, right? You know, but if they get into a batterer's intervention group, they're taught and they're using a curriculum that helps them focus on taking responsibility for their behaviors and changing those behaviors. So when we talk about how do we get moms and children into counseling, we also have to consider how do we get batterers the help they need to change their behaviors. You know, because I believe that battering is a learned behavior. Batterers get a lot of messages from community, from family members, from movies, from society, you know, through our laws, you know, that say, hey, go ahead and do this. You have the right. You know, you're the man of the house. You have the right to do this. So it's complicated, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, and just in response to the next question, do abusive spouses often prevent that from happening? I think they do everything in their power to stop their partners from getting any kind of support or help, because they want to keep that person back in their home under their control so they can continue to control them. So, yeah, I do think they do a lot to prevent that from happening. Might not let her take the car, take her there, or let someone else take her to counseling or therapy. Because, again, batterers are into power and control. They want to control everything. So I don't know, Vicki, if that was helpful, but those are some of my thoughts, and I would love to hear any feedback you or anybody on the call has to the responses I gave you. And, you know, please feel free to, oh, very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. And anybody else, I'll try to keep an eye on that, and then I'm just going to keep kind of moving along with the slides here. One thing about these webinars, time always gets away from us, right? But I like to hear from folks, so please ask questions. So let's go on to the next kind of developmental stage, connecting with toddlers. Again, always think about what you can do to repair that mother-child relationship. Again, toddlers, you know, 2, 3, 4 years old, they hear those messages. You know, I've worked with women where, like, she didn't cook the bacon good enough for him one time, and he stood over her with a club or a big stick and beat her and forced her to eat raw bacon in front of the children. You know, so most toddlers are going to scream and be terrified, and they're not going to understand what's going on. But some of them are getting the messages that, oh, she should have listened. She should have cooked that bacon just right. Then this wouldn't be happening. and they're powerless to stop it. So, you know, again, it's so important to help repair that mother-child relationship. And I always, especially when meeting a new family, to use a gentle approach, and whenever possible, let the child take the lead. And that means in conversation or play or whatever it is. As an adult, you can direct some of the behaviors or some of the play or whatever, but like some children don't want to sit down and read a book. They want to play with a toy. So if that child is wanting to play with a toy instead of reading a book, go along with them. And that's how you build relationships. That's the best way to build relationships, right, is to play with the kids. So, play and let them take the lead. Validate their feelings, and I think this is so critical because they have feelings, whether they're verbal or nonverbal. They might be screaming or crying or hitting or fighting. And I think it's okay to say, dang, you're really mad about that, aren't you? And again, that authenticity. You may not talk like that, but when I talk with kids, that's what's natural for me. So I say, dang, you're really mad because he took your toy, aren't you? And, it worked. It's surprising how frequently that can work. I remember we took some kids swimming one time, and we had them in a little wading pool, and this one little girl did not want to get out of the pool, and she was throwing a fit. And to use that skill of validating her feelings, I just kind of mimicked her behaviors, and I said, I don't want to get out of the pool either. Do you want to get out? You don't want to get out of the pool, do you? I just hate it. I want to swim forever. And she's looking at me, and pretty soon her little eyes started twinkling, and, and she knew that I heard her. And then we both kind of crossed our arms and stomped up the steps at the swimming pool, But that validation is so important because kids that are living with the batterer's violence become invisible, right, in so many different ways. So that validation of their verbal and nonverbal behaviors and what have you is so important. I said this before, play, play, play. Introduce age-appropriate toys and play. Use puppets. I've used puppets with kids that weren't able to, they didn't want to communicate, or they were fearful, or whatever it was, I've just seen so many kids communicate through little puppets, even if it's a sock over your hand, or to use a fluffy toy or whatever. It works really great with toddlers. And don't be afraid to provide structure. Kids really like to know what's expected of them and what's not expected of them. You don't have to be mean or bossy about it, because they've had enough of that, right? But providing structure. Okay, kids, we're gonna play this, for X amount of time, and then we're gonna go outside on the playground. So they like to know what's expected of them. I worked with this. Well, we're talking about toddlers now, but I worked with this little guy. He's 14 years old, and he ran away from his abusive dad and his mother that was being battered, and he ran away to some other relatives. And I asked him, I said, how come you ran away? I said, why was it so important to go to Uncle's house or whoever's house he went to? And he said, well, because I always know what's expected of me over there. So kids do not resist structure as much as we think sometimes. So I'm just going to call attention to this little box that I have on the side here to focus on the positive. And I think this works especially good with toddlers. Like they get naughty. I've worked with biters, pinchers, fighters, and instead of saying, oh, quit biting now, no more biting, we don't hit here or whatever, I'd focus on the positive. Oh, I saw you sharing that doll with your friend. I like that when you share. That's positive, right? With toddlers, it's so easy to redirect the behaviors when they're acting up, to just take the focus off that really quick and say, hey, let's play this. Wow, I really like this toy. Should we play with this for a little while? Toddlers will move away from that negative behavior. So you don't have to scold them or, discipline or, I was going to say punish, but we don't punish, right? We don't like to be that way with kids. But, and just to clarify what I mean here, the discipline means to teach. Punishment is punitive. They've had a lot of punitive things happen in their life. But when you're working with kids and you're building those relationships, we want to discipline them. And I always train advocates and volunteers and stuff to take a deep breath because, like I said, those little boogers can get under your skin, and they, and especially, if you're in a shelter setting and there's a number of kids, and they're all acting up, it's a reality. You want to tear your hair out sometimes, but I always train advocates and child care workers to take a deep breath and think. Take that deep breath. What do you want to teach them? Oh, I want to teach them, that we can play together and we don't have to hit or whatever it is, and then you do those behaviors. So what is it you want a child to learn? Now I'm going to go to this chat board because Karen said, do bullies at a young age become batterers as adults? Very good question. So that's a tough one. I do think that bullying is a learned behavior, and I think that kids bully because they get what they want, right? They scare, they intimidate, they bully someone to get what they want. So it's the same kind of behaviors or tactics that batterers use a lot of times. And it seems kind of harsh to say that about a child or a young person, but bullies get what they want. Do they always grow up to be batterers? No. Again, it depends on what kind of support they get in their home, from supportive family members, from community members, from school officials. I've worked with families. Sometimes the kids, their primary support person is a teacher in their school, or another friend in their school. So connecting them up with other people in their lives that don't support that behavior. One young girl was having trouble at home and acting out, and the mother worked with the teacher, and the teacher was really supportive to stop this child from being a bully. So do they grow up, to be, it's not a for sure thing. If they live with that constantly, I think, yeah, they do. They will become batterers. But again, when we're working with kids, one of the things, Karen, I always like to do was let kids know, especially youth and teenagers, that use violence and use it aggressively, and I could see that bullying behavior. I'd talk to them about, I just want to let you know, like, I don't know what your state, what your laws are or whatever, but in the state of Minnesota, once you turn 18, it becomes against the law to hit, the way a lot of bullies do. So especially working with young people, I'd say, you're doing this now. I said, but I just want you to know, if you do that when you're 18, you could get arrested and you could go to jail for doing that kind of behavior. So, there's a number of different strategies that you can use, and to help, again, build that relationship with the mother so she can help her understand why her child is using bullying behaviors and give her some skills to use to help unlearn that behavior. So Vicki, you said, what kinds of things do you say to children when you hear them blame the mother? Yeah, boy, you're asking some really good questions here, folks. I love talking about this stuff. I think it's so important, again, to focus on the positive. Go back to the slide, to focus on the positive. A lot of times they forget, if you hear someone blaming the mother, you can talk about not not necessarily right at that moment, but in many different interactions you have with a child. Let them know, hey, I heard your mom made this really fun birthday party happen for you last month. She said, she told me your cousins were over, and, you know, let the child know the positive things mom has done, because it's helping them reframe those messages that they're getting from the harm doer, that their mother is no good and does nothing for them. I was just thinking of another example of, you know, the way batterers drive a wedge. Like this one family, he would send her to town with the 4 kids with $60 to buy groceries. And this is in a rural area, so they had to drive 20, 30 miles, you know, to go to town. So she's going with all 4 kids and $60. What is she going to buy? She's going to buy staples. She's going to buy flour and sugar and, you know, fixings for meals that'll stretch, a big box of mac or whatever it is, right? That's what she's going to buy. And when they say, Mom, I want cookies. Mom, we have this? She's got to say no. So what would he do? He'd go to town, take all the 4 kids and $400 and ask them, hey, you guys, what do you want? So who looks good? You know, and I say this in response to this question about what can you say, you know, when that wedge has been drawn. I mean, you can say things like, geez, you know what, I know your mom's having a hard time. She doesn't always have money to get the things that you want, but can you tell me some of the things she's bought you when you've gone to town before? Or get them to focus on the positive things she has done, because that helps strengthen and rebuild that relationship. So, Vicki, I don't know if that response was helpful either. And again, you know, when we get off this call or whatever, just take some time to kind of kick back and think about positive things you can say about mom to the kids that you're working with, no matter what the age. I think it goes to say that it's probably not going to happen with infants, but you can certainly say things like that to toddlers and to school-age kids and certainly to teenagers. Okay, keep asking questions. I'm going to move on here, see if we can get to the next. Oh, school-age kids. Aren't they fun? I love those kids. I love every age of working with kids, though. You know, every age group kind of teaches me something about myself, about my own patience, about what I know and what I don't know. And anyway, yeah, I like school-age kids, too. Again, connect with a non-offending parent. Always report back the positives. Plan activities that involve the mother and child. Now, this age group is especially easy to kind of find activities to do with them, because the kids are a little bit older and they don't need quite as much, I don't know, attention. Not attention, that's not the right word, but they don't need as much, I can't think of the word right now, but, you know, there's so many activities that the kids are more independent and easier to kind of keep an eye on whatever. Like if you work in a program, maybe you can ask community to donate some movie tickets or something, you know. So, you know, if you're working with a school-age child, like say, you know, 9, 10 years old, it's easy enough to send mom and a school-age child to the movie together so they can spend time together, so they can build those positive memories.
I just put 4 hours. I didn't put the times on there.
Oh, someone has their phone unmuted here, but I don't think that was a question for the webinar here, so I'll keep moving. Understand, you know, and work to understand what typically works if a child exhibits violent acting out behaviors. Again, to talk with mom, you know, to find out, well, usually when your kid is acting out, like, what do you do, what works, you know, and what doesn't work, you know, because she's going to be the one to tell you, and then you can bring in some of your own skills and knowledge and experiences, you know, to help redirect some of those behaviors. Again, validating feelings. I just can't stress that enough. The kids, you know, I remember this one kid came off the bus. I was working at the shelter, and he came in the door, and he slammed the stuff down on the floor, and he hit the wall, and, you know, and I said, dang, I said, you had a rough day, didn't you? You're really mad today. And he just stopped, and he looked at me, and he says, no, I'm not mad. Well, my friend, somebody hit her on the bus, and it made me mad. You know, and it just got, it just by saying that to him, right, wrong, if I was right or wrong about what the feelings were, it opened that door so he could express what was going on with him. And really, that's kind of all he needed. And that's, you know, most of the time, that's all kids need, you know, because, again, you know, what do kids want or need more than anything? They want attention. And how long did it take to say, dang, you're having a rough day today, huh? Because you're really mad. What, 4 to 5 seconds? It doesn't take long. And just that little moment of attention can make all the difference in the world for building those relationships with kids. So, again, give them positive attention because they're going to get it with negative behaviors, and we're on them, right? You know, stop this, don't do that, I'm going to put you in timeout. I mean, both as parents or as advocates, I don't think we do that so much in our programs, but I always say that if we talk to our coworkers and stuff the way we talk to our kids, sometimes we'd all be fired, right? Because we talk terrible to kids, you know, boss them around, get mad at them, and but again, as an advocate working in a program, when you use those skills, you're modeling that for a mother who is in crises. And when she sees that happen over and over again, and she sees the behaviors changing, she relaxes, can take care of the business she needs to take care of, and it helps. You know, a well-behaved child is just so much easier to take care of. You know, one of the other activities I like to do is we had a little extra donation one time, so I took 3 families out to eat at a little restaurant in town. And, you know, the mothers are saying, oh, my God, I can't take them in public. They're so awful, you know, we can't be out in public. But, you know, you really enjoy your children better when they behave, right? So I would try to help and model some behaviors on how to teach kids how to act when they were out in public eating. I mean, it was just a simple kind of fun activity. The kids loved it. They loved being with their mother. It was help strengthening that relationship. It was helping mothers see different ways that they could really enjoy and be with their kids. And when they're living with a batterer, they probably never got to do that. So, I mean, it's just those little things, you know, be creative. It's amazing how behaviors can change. Okay, we're out of questions on the chat board. I'm going to keep going. If you have any more, keep asking. I'm going to leave a little bit more time at the end here, too. Excuse me. So I think what I found is it's really challenging for a lot of people to work with youth and teens, you know, because number one, I think it's because we have learned, you know, through assimilation, through colonization, we have learned to invisibilize our youth and teens. And I think the other factor is that when a woman is living with violence, you know, when her kids get old enough so she doesn't have to monitor and watch over them every single minute, you know, they can go off on their own, but there's so many things that kids can get involved with, you know, when they're not supervised. So a lot of our youth and teens are unsupervised. And they go out in the community with other kids that are unsupervised, or, you know, there's just so many things that they can get into. So I think people are kind of scared to talk sometimes to youth and teens, and really they're the ones that need they need just as much as time and attention as a toddler. You know, and I always say, you know, I guess I don't know personally anybody who's at a 14-year-old, and I call it going off the deep end. Because, you know, 14 years, that's a hard age. The hormones are kicking in, and so many things happen. Now, what was I going to say about that? Well, there's so many outside influences, and that's when they need just as much attention as a toddler, and we need to make them visible, and we need to honor them. And again, youth and teens have taught me so much personally about myself. Again, like my own patience, my own ability to really see and hear. You know, as parents and as advocates, I think we're really conditioned to kind of lecture and tell kids, especially youth and teens, what to do and what not to do. So we don't really listen to them. And this, again, comes back to how important that validation is. It doesn't matter if we're right or wrong or the youth's behavior is right or wrong. What matters is they need to be seen, they need to be heard, and they need to be validated. And then they need help kind of reframing what it is that they're thinking or what it is they're doing. And, you know, I think as advocates, especially, you know, we can give them skills to really make different choices about what they're doing. I worked with this one young kid. He's like 12, 13 years old, and he sat in this rocking chair. It was almost kind of scary, but he sat in this rocking chair, and he had this. It wasn't a bat. I think it was like a paper towel roll or something, and he kept hitting this in his hand like a bat, and he was hitting it really hard. And he had this really angry, scary look on his face, and he said, when I get there, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him for hurting my mom. You know, and he was like 12, 13 years old. And, you know, I mean, the potential for that actually happening, we know that there's a lot of teens, and especially teen boys, that have killed their mother's abusive partners. And what does, you know, that just robs this child of the rest of their life. So again, that validation and leaving that door open that it's okay to be angry. And regardless of the age, I always gave kids the message, it's okay to love dad or the stepdad. It's okay to love them. It's the behavior that's wrong. You know, I remember talking to this kid and saying, you know, it's just not right that, you know, you love your dad, and your dad, you've had a really, really good times with him in the past, but when he hurts your mom, it hurts you and you get scared and you want to hurt him. So it's okay not to like that behavior, because that behavior is not okay. So, I mean, just giving them a different framework and way of thinking about different things on so many levels. And that's just one small example. And I'm just going to say the important thing to treat them with dignity and respect. Again, I think they are our most invisible group of children in both our families, our communities, and society as a whole. So I just, you know, in whatever way you can, let them know that they're seen and that they're heard. And even if some of the things they say, oh, my 4-year-old grandson just popped in here. I'm on the phone, honey. Can you go talk with Mama?
No.
No? You want to stay here? Then you can be quiet? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So I had to see him and hear him, too, because that's important, right? But 14-year-olds need that, too. And then to focus on their strengths and their abilities, I think, is really important. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there and go back to Vicki. Is there any way someone could send me this transcript? Oh, well, that's out of my, I don't know who can do that. But probably Hanavi can do that, or at least I don't know.
Yep. So I can get you either the recording we are sent, or you can check it out on our YouTube. We'll be putting it up there in a few days.
Oh, that's scary for me. I better talk clear. All right, thank you for letting us know about that. Oh, and you know, the other thing when working with youth and teens is to explain your role as an advocate. I think, you know, I always found that it was really important when I let them know what my role was and, you know, how I was willing to be a voice for them sometimes too. Because I think in a lot of programs they have this policy, you know, you have to take away the cell phones, or they can't call their friends. Well, the most important people in a teen's life are their friends, right? A lot of times if they're in a battering relationship or something's going on, they will talk with their friends before they will talk to their parents or aunties or uncles or teachers or someone else, you know. So those connections with friends is really important. And I think they will really understand, you know, if you tell them, hey, you know, if you're in a shelter setting, you know, kind of the experience I'm talking about right now is from working in a shelter. You know, I would tell them, you know, I will talk with your mom and I will talk with the other advocates about letting you keep your cell phone. But here's the deal. You know, we need to make sure that everybody is safe here because, well, and I told this kid this one time. I said, yeah, you know, so-and-so is staying here and her boyfriend threatened to kill her. So we want to make sure nobody's going to get killed or hurt. So we want to make sure that when you do talk to your friend that you don't give out any information that could get somebody really, really hurt. And guess what? Kids are smart, and they'll figure that out, and they can make that decision. And, you know, and I think it's okay to just ask them flat out, can you keep certain information confidential, you know, and then thank them for that and thank them for doing that. Let's see. So what does your program have in place to increase teens' capacity to counter the effects? Oh, sweetie boy. Oh, I'll be done in a little bit, sweetie. Love you. Oh, he wanted to come join the call. I apologize for the interruption, but he's 4 years old. Anyway, yeah, I think it's really important for you to kind of assess what's going on in your program and see what you have in place. You know, so to help teenagers kind of counter the effects of the abuse, you know, like, are there activities, different things that they can do, organizing things, find out what their interests are, you know. And I mean, I worked with this one community, the teens in their community wanted to build a, what do you call those boards that you roll up and down those ramps? They wanted to build a, I can't think of the word right now, but you probably know what I'm talking about. And they help the kids organize, teens organize, and talk with community members and get the process moving for building a small little skateboards so they could use their skateboards. You know, so those kinds of activities help counter the effects of the abuse. You point them in a positive direction, and it's amazing what they can accomplish. I am going to move on to this next slide here. Tips for de-escalating angry, aggressive behaviors. Now, I always find this process kind of disturbing because, number one, all the different things that I've talked about throughout this presentation, I think if you use, you know, redirecting behavior, helping moms and kids reconnect or strengthen their relationship, you know, all the different things that I talked about so many times. In all the years I worked with children was just a multitude of behaviors that, you know, sometimes I wonder how I did it. Of course, I was a lot younger then, but, you know, I never had to use restraining techniques or whatever because I used so many of the other skills that I've been talking about throughout this presentation. And again, you know, the skill I use the most is what do I want to teach children and youth? I remember being out on the playground with 17 kids that were living with the batterer's violence and all the behaviors in between. And we had aggressive, angry behaviors. And it took a lot of energy, but I think the training that I gave to the child care workers, to the advocates and foster grandmothers and others helping to work with the kids, we were able to redirect the behaviors and de-escalate a lot of the really aggressive behaviors without having to raise our voices, without having to put anybody in timeout or any of that kind of stuff. Because, we were asking ourselves constantly, what do we want children to learn? Like this one little boy, I think he was about 12 years old. I mean, he was really angry, really aggressive, and, you know, if we would have just let him have his way, he would have hurt other kids on the playground. But I noticed that he was helping this one little guy, this other little boy is about 4 or 5 years old, and he was helping him. So I started focusing on that positive behavior, and I started thanking him for helping that little guy. And I'd say things like, gee, you're really a good helper, aren't you? You know, I'm glad you're helping that guy because I got to help this little guy over here. So then I'd turn my attention away, come back again, praise him for helping this little boy, focusing on the positive. And that's what kids want because, again, that's what they want is that attention. Now, with that being said, I just want to share one other story that I also worked with a little boy. He's about 2 years old, and he was a biter. Have any of you ever worked with a biter in a communal setting? It can really raise heck with everything, right? And this little boy bit everybody, advocates, moms, other kids, everybody. And I tried really hard again to train the advocates. This was in a large urban shelter that I worked in. And I tried to train everybody to use a lot of the skills that I've been talking about throughout this presentation. And they were all using it with this little guy. And it was just a matter of a couple of weeks before he stopped biting. He didn't have to anymore. He was getting positive attention. He was being validated. He was being seen. He was being heard. He felt safe. So he didn't have to do that anymore. So I'm saying this because I think it's challenging. It's difficult. Sometimes you have to learn how to do these things, but it's very possible, and it changes behavior. So with that being said, if it ever gets to a point where it's just too much, and in all the years I worked with kids, I only restrained a child one time because he was absolutely out of control. And I only did it with direct permission from the mother. I asked her, this little guy was 4 years old. I asked her, will you be okay if I just gently hold him? Because a lot of times when, and this is a skill, and I guess I would recommend that you, if you're going to try to use this skill, that you do some research and find out the techniques and the best possible way to do this. Because I know I'm not going to cover all the points in this presentation, but talk with the, with the non-offending parent and ask, is it okay if I restrain your child the next time he gets so violent, he's totally out of control? And I said, if I have to do that, I would like you to be present and help me do this. A lot of times kids just get so overstimulated, and they're so hurt by the violence that they're living with, by seeing their mother getting, this little guy watched his mother being raped, being brutally beaten, things thrown at his siblings, things thrown at him. He was physically abused by his stepdad. I mean, just so many things were happening in his life, and it's no wonder he was out of control. And, kind of going back, Vicki, to your question earlier, would counseling be beneficial for this little guy? Maybe some outside intervention. I don't know. And you'll have to use your own judgment when you're working with families and within your programs, if this is something you want to do. But again, I would recommend that you investigate, does whoever's going to be working with a child like this, do they understand what this child has been living with and the learned behaviors that go along with it, and who is responsible for that? All these different things. You want to get help, but you want help from someone who understands what living with a batter's violence is all about. So again, going back to, I just want to say this here. The first thing I have on this slide is to pick your battles, right? Like sometimes we don't have to zero in on every negative behavior a child has, because that just calls attention to it. That's why I think focusing on the positive is so much better. But, pick your battles. If they're just acting out and you can redirect the behavior, have them do something different, then, then that's great, But if the behavior is really out of control, then you need to set the clear guidelines for behavior during the welcome interview. Talk with the mother, talk with the child. And, like kids as young as 4 or 5 years old, you can say, we want this to be a safe place. We don't want anybody hurt, or, whatever language you use, depending on the age. During the welcoming interview, you can set out some of those guidelines. You can continually validate those feelings or whatever, redirect the behavior. Brainstorm with other staff, with the mothers, about possible ways to stop them from harming themselves or harming others. And then the teacher's breathing technique, take deep breaths. What do you want this child to learn? And then if all else fails, then to use the proper technique to restrain a child is so important. And I'll just use this one little guy for an example. Like, I told him, I'd see his behavior acting out. I tried all the skills I knew to redirect or change the behavior. Nothing was working. And I finally said, I don't know what his name was, Timmy. Timmy, if I see you hurting that little guy again, because he was just picking on this 2-year-old, twice his size, and he was just wailing on this little guy and punching him and biting him and teasing him. And, I finally had to say, Timmy, if I see you doing that, I have to stop you, because that little boy doesn't deserve to be hurt. Next time, is it okay if I just put my arms around you until I calm you down? So I didn't do it, but I just told him, that this behavior wasn't acceptable. This is what I might have to do. And I'm just kind of giving you the heads up that this might happen. And sure enough, it worked, for off and on for quite a while. But then one time it was just like totally out of control. So I went and I got Mom, and I told Timmy, I said, I'm going to put my arms around you, and we're just going to take some deep breaths together and calm down. We need to shake it off. And I think at that time I called it a face eraser, because I saw this little show on TV where when the kids were being naughty, they did a face eraser, and they just go blah and shake it off. And so that's what I, tried to have him do. And I just tried to talk soft. I tried to talk calmly. We tried to do it away from everybody else. Mom was right there. And just gently, quietly, calmly, with deep breathing, tried to calm him down. Now, that's one example. Again, like I said, if you can do some research or you can Google anything now, there might be some newer, better techniques. But again, always think about what is it you want to teach this child? What do you want them to learn? And in situations where they're really, really over the top with their emotions, you know, you want to teach them ways to calm themselves down. I think that's really important. So, okay, now I don't, Hanabi, how much time do we have? I just want to take Vicky's question here, and then maybe you start opening it up for more. If you have a certain problem or situation you want to address here, I'd be happy to address that.
Yeah.
You were going to say?
We have about 20 minutes, so
okay.
Yeah, we have plenty of time.
Okay. All right, so Vicki, you're saying, not sure how to ask this one, but when kids are exposed to an advocate who follows your tips, then they are exposed to the abusive parent again. Does their behavior get worse after a while? Does their anger get worse? Oh, boy, Vicki, you have some tough questions. I meant, have you seen their behavior get worse when they have positive experiences and their feelings? I'm not sure what AA means, but, are validated. Do they tend to see how wrong the abuser is and get angrier? Oh, yeah. Yeah, your questions are really hard to give a definitive answer, I think, Vicki, but the fact that you're asking them tells me that you're a deep and critical thinker and that you want to try to do the best you can for kids. And I'm telling you, as an advocate for kids, that's all I ask, is for people to try and to try to do better and try to understand, you know, how kids are affected by living with this violence and how we can help them kind of reclaim their personal power, not take it personally, not blame themselves. I'm kind of a firm believer, and now some people might not agree with this, but I've worked with so many kids impacted by violence, and they can tell you the stories. They have seen and heard it all. So I honestly don't know, when we're coming from that place of love, when we want to make a difference, when we want to authentically and deeply and truly want to help kids regardless of the age, and deeply and authentically want to help the women that are being battered, that there isn't too much that we can say or do that's really going to cause harm. So I think sometimes just like that little guy that was slamming like this baseball bat in his hand, you know, he was ready to kill. He wanted to kill. He expressed the need to kill. So I didn't think it would be hurtful if I said, wow, you really want to kill him. You're so mad. You just want to hurt him bad. That's his reality. That might not be his reality an hour from now, 2 hours from now, 2 years from now. But right now, in that moment, that's what he was feeling. So I think acknowledging that is really important. And then you can talk with them, and again, stress that, you know, your dad or your stepdad or whoever's hurting your mom, you know, it's okay to like him and have good, fun times with him, but he's got to change his behavior, because that is not right. Your mom does not deserve to be treated like that. I think it's okay to say stuff like that, because that's a reality, right? And I think kids understand that. I guess I don't know, you know, when they've been treated like this, I'm sure when they go back, when they're treated respectfully, when they're seen and heard and validated and all that good stuff, when they go back home and, you know, the same thing is happening, of course, I think they're going to be angry, frustrated, feel helpless. Their behavior may get a turn for the worse. But again, this comes back to why it's so important to strengthen that relationship between the mother and the child, and to give mom the tools, some new tools that she can work with, some messages she can give her child, to let her child or children know that, this isn't my fault, but it isn't your fault either. It's okay to love Dad. It's not okay that he behaved like this. It's his behavior that's wrong. So just finding those ways to give kids messages, tools, skills, a vocabulary. And of course, we always have to be aware of unintended consequences. I would never ask a child to confront a violent father or step-parent or whatever, because they could get hurt. So you don't want to encourage them to confront that behavior, to physically strike or try to hurt an abusive father or stepfather or whoever is causing harm. You don't want them to intervene if mom's getting beat up. I mean, these are all messages that, however you are interacting with kids in your program, kind of brainstorm with other staff, other faculty, other advocates, or, with people on this list, like, how do you handle this, or what would you say, or what could we say, to a child? Because, they're going back home one way or the other, and they're usually going to go back with a mother who may or may not leave the relationship. They're going to be exposed to it all over again, but each time you help them reclaim their personal power, give them some skills and messages that it's not mom's fault, it's not their fault. Don't confront the behavior or try to intervene if mom's getting beat up, but, these are things that you can do. You can tell, remember we talked about auntie? Your auntie is always there to protect you, or, whatever it is. Maybe you can go talk to auntie and be with auntie till things calm down, because she will help you. Get them connected with a supportive system, not just mom, but other supportive family and community members. And it might be a teacher, like I said, or it might be, someone else in the community. So, okay, I'm going to see if I have another slide here or not. Oh, no, I don't. So, I think we are almost near the end, but we have a little bit of time. If you have any other questions, or you have a child of a certain age and you're trying to work through some stuff, you want us to brainstorm together about possible ways to help deal with that situation or anything, let's talk about it. Vicki, thank you so much, and Karen, and for the comments in the chat box. I think those are really helpful, because like I said, as a presenter, I don't always know what people are dealing with, what your policies and practices are in your program, or even what kind of program it is. If you have questions, now's a good time, as good a time as any. I see a comment. Vicki, may I contact you via email? Of course. I'm always, like I said, I know a few things. I don't know a lot, but I'm always happy to help, and I'm especially happy to help because I am an advocate for youth or children. I cannot stand to see them beaten or raped, and I cannot stand to have their little spirits assaulted. I always talk about, shaming. There's a lot of tribal folks that use shaming as a kind of a teaching or a way to discipline or whatever. And, I know I don't want to go against traditions or anything like that, but I think that shaming, attacks their spirit in so many different ways. And I can't stand to see a child's spirit attacked any more than their little bodies or their minds or, have them hurt in any way. So Constance, you said thank you for the suggestions and insight. Very cross-cultural. Thank you for that. Janice, thank you for this information. So Hanabi, I think if, unless anybody else has any situations they want to discuss or whatever, I don't know what to say, I just thank you, all of you, for the work that you're doing and for your compassion and hearts to work with families. I just think this is so important. When I first started doing the work, Vicki, you're asking how long I've been an advocate. I think I've been an advocate my entire life, fighting oppression and racism and, and then battering and sexual violence and what have you. But I started, I guess, as being a paid advocate probably about 25 years ago. And I've done a lot of direct services, and I've kind of moved into really focusing on changing how systems respond and, changing how people think this is okay. I want to change their attitudes and beliefs. It is not funny. When a woman is getting beat or raped or a child, it is not funny. So we got to change how people think and believe and act. So, yeah, there's a lot of work to do. Yeah, and Vicki, you're saying there's a lot of families that have become successful and escaped those situations. Absolutely, and I think the role of advocates in terms of being that powerful force for change it's made the difference. I started to say when I started doing this work about 25 years ago, like I'd go to different events, and I'd hardly ever see a Native advocate, and I'd be looking around and I'd see one, I'd be all happy, and, now I go places and, man, there's a lot of Native advocates doing amazing work, and, we might not always be doing the same kinds of work or whatever, but we all have that common vision is to end it and to help our families heal and reclaim our culture, reclaim our languages, our traditions, our music, our land bases, so many different things. And it's all connected, right? So we're advocates, we're powerful, we have done amazing things, and we continue to do amazing things. And I just want to thank everybody who participated in this call and is doing the work to make a difference for our family. So thank you. I think I'm done. Thanks, everybody.
All righty. Well, if no one else has any questions, we will start wrapping up. So before we end the call, I would just like to remind everyone of our upcoming webinars. So on September 16th, we will be having sexual assault within trafficking in tribal communities. That is on September 16th. And then we just set this up. On September 23rd, we will be having technology use in violence against children and youth. And that will be on September 23rd. And then once again, these webinars will be put up on our YouTube. So if you look up Red Wind Consulting on YouTube, you will be able to find our page. and this will be in the Children and Youth section. And other than that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. I'd like to thank our presenters, and I'd like to thank our host. So, have a wonderful day, everyone. Oh, yes, Vicky? So, Vicky asks, how do you deal with the stress of dealing with the abuse?
So this is Sandy. I was just getting ready to hang up, but I can respond to that. I think, again, we help women that are being battered by connecting them with support, with people who do not condone this kind of behavior, you know, whether it's friends or family or other advocates or other women that are being battered. I think we help them deal with the stress by connecting them with a strong, strong support system. Like I said, as an advocate, you're only in her life and those children's life for a very short amount of time. So the bigger network of support you can build really helps eliminate that stress. And I think some of the tips that I used in this webinar today, you know, to help her manage her kids' behavior, you know, because they've seen all this violence, and to give her some skills and tools to use and rebuild that relationship, that eliminates stress. Like when your kids don't act up, they're a lot easier to deal with. There's a lot less stress in your life, and, you know, so I think it's a process of giving skills and information. You know, there's any number of different things. You know, life in general is stressful, and I think parenting, when you're walking through fire, is one of the most stressful things to do. And so any tools or support that we can give a woman that's being battered is really, really helpful. And above all, don't forget to keep the focus on those that are causing the harm and working for interventions that get the help he needs to change behavior. He needs to change his behavior, or moms and kids will continue to live in that stressful environment. So we need to focus a lot of attention on the batterer and the batterer's behavior. And, you know, does it mean criminal legal system? Sometimes it does. Some of them need to be locked up because they are so dangerous. Are there other interventions that can help him take responsibility for his actions and change? Because when he changes, the whole family dynamic will change. So we have to keep the focus there too. That eliminates a lot of stress. So I think again I can end on that. And again, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest and participating in this, and for all the work you do on behalf of women and kids. Miigwech.
All right. So, once again, I'd like to thank our presenter, and I'd like to thank our host, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.